Okay, guys, welcome back to another developer diary for Project Bronze. It's been a week since we last spoke. It's been a crazy week. Some crazy things have happened with the project. We're making progress, but it's been one of those weeks where you you make some progress, one step forward, two steps back. Um, in short, we nuked the project this week. As you can see from the thumbnail, we had some big issues and we broke the project. Stick around, watch the whole video. We'll talk about that at the end and let you know how we resolved it and clawed it back. But in the meantime, I want to talk to you all about some of the new features we've implemented and some of the new sort of artistic elements that you can see in the game. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into it. The first thing you're going to notice in the latest build of the game is that the character can walk again. Well, probably not the first thing you're going to notice. The first thing you're going to notice is that we have a big Igbo sword inspired by weapons from Nigerian history in our character's hand now. So that's kind of a big deal. The character now has a weapon, but we're also able to traverse the environment at a slower pace, which allows us to take in some of the details, some of the environmental storytelling that's already coming in at this really early stage in the game. I don't know about you, but I feel like games are always that much more enticing when you're able to choose the speed at which you move through it. I really like games that give you power and speed and velocity, but also allow you to take your time and slow it down and have a quiet moment with a character or the environment. So being able to re-implement the walking system, that slower mode of locomotion, was really important for us. You'll notice that the animations are not perfect, and we're going to tweak this stuff as we go and make sure that we can have a walking animation that's elegant. Right now, our character feels a little bit hunched over. We're using the sort of baseline SK mannequin, which really serves a great purpose, but I think that this character is going to need a little bit more personality in the way they walk. He feels a little bit too hunched over. I don't know, maybe it's perfect. Who knows? Give us some feedback. Let us know what you think about these animations. Generally, we want to move away from using any kinds of default animations at all in the long run, but that's where we're at right now. All right, let's jump into some other features. We still have the running locomotion, and you can see that we have a new enemy character he's floating a little bit because his IK hasn't been retargeted yet, but here he is. We're calling this guy Gil for now, just as a sort of placeholder name. But really interestingly, you'll notice that he has some armor. It's a little bit misaligned right now. But Gil, who's the placeholder for the first enemy that the player's going to meet, actually has armor, which is huge. Right now, we've been using primarily sort of placeholder robes that were developed in Marvelous Designer and brought in using Chaos Cloth. And actually, I'm quite fond of them, but alone, they don't really substantiate the outfits that our characters are going to need. So at best, they'll probably be a base for something more complex. But with Gil over here, what we've started doing is designing and developing armor and equipment that our characters in the world can actually wear to give them this unique kind of persona, personality, and appearance in the world. It's allowed us to do lots of historical digging, but it's also teaching us a bunch of new skill sets, including more rigorous modeling in Blender. We have some experience with that, but very limited. So we're more rigorously modeling attire in Blender, and we're bringing that stuff into Substance Painter as well and learning the texturing process. This is all really important stuff. It's all built on top of concept art as well, and we do have artistic skill in our team. I myself am an avid draftsperson, digital painter, and so on and so on. And my background is in 2D art, and this 3D stuff is quite new for me. So we'll show you some of our concept art in a moment. One of the big challenges we're having is actually rigging the clothing to the metahuman. Because we're using the metahuman as a base, our skin and our character's appearance isn't part of the mesh, so to speak. So we're learning how to properly, for example, attach the vertex meshes of the metahuman to the vertex meshes of the of the body to the skeleton, so that the skeleton can then translate the movement of the armor back to the character when we re-arrive in Unreal. It's a complicated process, and I'm sure that anybody, I keep seeing memes of people talking about how the different parts of bringing a character into a game have varying degrees of complexity and pleasure. Like texturing is really fun, concept art is really fun, modeling is really challenging and fun, but rigging and attaching vertex groups is just so hard and tricky. And yeah, we'll talk more about that later, because the big problem that we had with the project nuking itself was related to skeletons and bones and treatments of those. So let's fast forward a little bit. Let's look at some of our concept art. So here you can see some early designs for Gil, looking at equipping him with a helmet, which he doesn't have yet, a Mandara sword, and some accessories like a pouch, a belt, a knife. Gil is going to be the very first, whichever way he evolves over time, he's going to be the very first enemy that the player meets. So he has to have a simplicity to him. The idea is that Gil is probably some kind of traveling mercenary. So he doesn't necessarily have the specific armor and outfits inspired by the local environment, which is largely derived from the idea of the Kingdom of Benin. So we wanted to keep his equipment simple, but also mercantile, this idea that he's maybe picking through a battlefield for bits of armor that he's found. He's probably a traveler just like the player. And, he's a wretched early enemy, So he's got a Mandara sword there. Maybe we're thinking about giving him one of those, a sword inspired by the Mandara swords. Knives that maybe evoke that he might have traveled from a place inspired by parts of East Africa. And they're really interestingly these different helmets. So maybe like a Cameroonian style helmet, or on the left you can see a more a helmet that's maybe more typical of what you might see in the Yoruba style historically. But I think that this type of helmet probably lends itself to a more ceremonial, higher rank kind of situation, which might not be appropriate for this character who the player is meeting so early on. The helmet on the right is the Sanufo style. I've referred to it as Cameroonian. I think I might be wrong there. But the Sanufu style helmets that we're digging up and looking at could be more appropriate because it appears to be, it has a simpler silhouette. The actual original objects themselves probably had some sort of more prominent importance, but we're inspired by the sort of simple dome shape, probably quite close fitting style of a copper, brass or bronze Senufo helm, Senufu style helm. So we pulled some inspiration from that. And then initially I wanted Gil to have some robes, maybe use some of the Chaos Cloth physics to give him a sort of, some kind of flowing robe, but that's additional layers of complexity. So what we decided to do instead was start emulating cloth simulation as the basis for meshes in Blender. And that process was really fun, really interesting. We want to show you more of that later on, because you can actually do some of the stuff that you do in Marvelous Designer in Blender with a couple more steps, but it isn't insanely more complex. We'll show you more of that as we go. And, from indie dev to indie dev, you really want to be able to do as much as you can by spending as little money as you can, because funding is always one of the biggest obstacles we face as independent artists and makers and creators. So once I realized that we could start to sort of do equivalent cloth simulation in Blender without Marvelous Designer, it was kind of a no-brainer. And it really wasn't as tricky to do as I thought. And we don't really need the cloth simulation elements, because what we will likely do is simulate the cloth to create a basis for our mesh, retopologize it, and then weight paint that element so that we have something a little bit more usable, but with the same kind of realistic appearance. So once we were kind of happy with our concept art, we took that over into Substance Painter and started to build some textures that kind of give Gil the characteristic of being this sort of grubby mercenary who is ready for combat, maybe has a bit of an expensive hilted dagger, but otherwise is, he's like the player. He's on a journey. He's arrived in this space. He doesn't really know what's going on, but he knows that there's danger and there's threat and there's combat, so he's prepared for that. Substance Painter is a really interesting piece of software. It allows you great flexibility to get things looking quite realistic with quite minimal effort. And I detect that we're probably just scratching the surface of Substance Painter. Okay, so let's jump back into Unreal and show you some more of what we've got going on. Because we want to show you our new feature, which you just saw there as I clicked into the simulation. So we now have a attack system, which is fantastic because we need that, right? And not only do we have an attack system, but we have a combo system. So we have a 3-hit combo implemented into the game. I'm still getting the timing down, so we can repeat our first attack as much as we want, and then we go 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's really cool. Right now, our attacks don't have any effect on the world, but we do have a trace, which is allowing us to detect the damage that is going to be applied soon. So you can see when the debug mesh turns green, we're registering hits, which is great. So moving forward, we really want to get Gil here properly rigged to his armor, allow his animations to drop in, and then start figuring out how we can turn these attacks into something that applies damage to his health and eventually takes him out of the picture. After that, we'll probably look at implementing his AI core so that he can, respond to that attack and attack back. Those are the big developments over the past week. Aside from that, also huge for our studio is that we went live with our socials and we made our announcement. And I'm sure you're all going to have some kind of comparable experience of revealing your project to the world. Is such a nerve-wracking thing. In the past, I've revealed projects to the world, and sometimes, you just don't get a response, and it can always be really deflating and upsetting. But the response from the community to us releasing our game has been so overwhelmingly positive. We're almost lost for words over here at Inverse Works because the reception from people has been so positive. We've had so many comments from people saying, hey, we want this. We've been waiting for this. We want to see this Souls-like game set in Africa. Where can we wishlist it? And I just want to go through. I want to speak to you about how happy we are with the response, especially on TikTok, where it's been almost a constant flow of just positive support, excitement, and encouragement. Also, on top of that, we've had lots of community feedback, and part of what we've been editing in the game has been directly pulled from your feedback. Because, like we said in the first video, part of the reason we're here is because we need community support. We need your feedback. We're two guys working in isolation, and we need the community around us. So some of the comments that we've already had, Lil B Lover on TikTok said, focus on the presentation of gameplay. We've taken that on board, and we really want to, we're always going to share our assets and concept art and things like that. But today we wanted to showcase as much gameplay as possible. One comment was directly underneath our previous developer diary from Igor, and Igor said, dev diary should be shorter and edited. So hopefully we're delivering on that. We've definitely tried to make it shorter. So thanks, Igor. That was a really big one. We're new to dev diary, so that's great feedback. And then another really good piece of feedback from Tajmalia on TikTok was to reduce the size of the lock-on widget and reduce its opacity so that the player can see the enemy telegraphing more clearly. And we've done that as well. We thought that was really profound feedback. Like, that's so on point. And as you can see that now, our target lock-on widget is a bit smaller and more opaque. So the player is going to have an easier time seeing what the enemy is doing while they're locked on. Really great feedback. Thank you guys. Thank you for your support. Really, we're here doing this for you, doing this for the fans. So thank you. Please continue to follow us on this journey and share your thoughts, your feelings, your feedback about our game with us as much as you can. So, as promised at the beginning of the video, I was going to tell you how we broke our project. Our project did collapse. It did explode in on itself. And what happened was we were trying to rig Gil's armor, Gil, causing problems for us, to his metahuman skeletal mesh. We're probably going about it in the totally wrong way, but it's something we're figuring out and learning and moving through, like different tutorials, talking to different people, even like asking ChatGPT, how do these bones work? Can you help us figure this out? We're not afraid to exhaust any resource when it comes to problem solving and figuring out how to resolve technical issues. All of the creativity, everything you see on the screen comes from us and licensed assets like the MetaHuman base plate. But when it comes to figuring out problems, we'll go anywhere because we're keen and eager to learn. And what we had discovered we had done is we had introduced a skeletal mesh into the game, which did not work and was not properly set up, and had mistakenly replaced all of the skeletal meshes for our characters with that problematic mesh. So basically what we did is we deleted all of our characters' bones. Her bones were gone, the player character's bones were gone, Gil's bones were gone, and everybody sort of collapsed into a gelatinous mess in my imagination. What actually happened in reality is because those bones weren't loadable, the project crashed, the project wouldn't open. And luckily for us, we had a backed up version and we had to do a version recall and return to a previous version of the project. Luckily, in terms of hours spent, because the previous version was still relatively fresh, we only lost about 2 to 3 hours of actual making, which was a relief. But a word of warning, just be careful with how you import skeletal meshes. And my lesson is to pay very close attention to Unreal when it gives you warning messages, because it isn't playing around. So I think I'll end it on that note. We have had some setbacks this week, but some also big steps forward. We have a combo system, which is awesome, So stay tuned. We're going to be refining our animations more, adding more animations, developing our combat system more, making some more aesthetical changes as we move through the game. Hopefully within the next 2-3 weeks or whatever it is, our combat system will feel more akin to what you might expect from a game like this. So stay tuned, give us your feedback, and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks, guys.